Once was a swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree. As he sat, as he watched and waited while his billy boiled, who'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnie Lukes at the Crossroads. We have the home forum this morning, and I'd like to welcome our panellists from Victoria. Judith Auchterlonie. Welcome, Judy.
Yes, thanks, Arnie. Morning.
And from Narracourt, South Australia, Jenny Grundy. Welcome, Jenny.
Good morning.
And from Happy Valley, South Australia, welcome, Beata.
Good morning.
Okay. Now, we recently had celebrated, observed, watched, partly attended remotely, if you like, a royal wedding. And it highlighted in my mind the system of constitution that we live under. A limited monarchical system, a limited government, limited constitutional monarchical system, which means that the terms of reference for the government to operate are specific and restricted. They're only in these areas. And of course, the history of Australian constitution is such that the politicians have been kicking and screaming for 100 plus years trying to increase their powers. They're just devoted to this, increasing their powers. And of course, we see it when we see the referenda. It's always about an expansion of powers of at the federal level. Give them more power, take it away from the states, giving less representation to the people. Now, the preamble to our constitution: we the people of the various states, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God. It's a Christian constitution, and it is owned, and it's an agreement by the people. And that is that the people came together. The constitutional conventions ran for at least 10 years, and in those discussions and debates and forums, there was arguments for, there was arguments against, and in the end, all the states came together, not at the same time. Western Australia lagged behind because it wasn't ready. But when it was ready, it did come, and it became part of our federation. And so there's a lot of history there. And the fact is, it's an agreement by the people. And I think that's a beautiful thing to keep in mind as we move towards this, taking into account the royal wedding. All right, Judith Auchterlonie, your floor.
Yeah, thank you, Arnie. The royal wedding was quite special, wasn't it? And it highlighted for me the whole monarchical system and the importance it has in people's lives regarding the control that we have over government through that system, and the fact that our watching Prince Harry and his lovely bride, they are not, they're down the line a bit in claim to the throne, and claim's not probably the right word, but we saw Prince Charles, we saw Harry's brother William, and they will be the ongoing monarchs in our lovely system. And I found the whole thing very warm and special, and it's just wonderful to see the people of England and the people of Australia standing up, celebrating what we have.
I think that's really, 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 really important that that those people of Britain in our Commonwealth who share the monarch, and we share this celebration of a system that is more than 1,000 years old. I think that's most important. Jenny Grundy.
Yes, well, we are very privileged to live within a monarchy. The British monarchy is a very old institution, as we all know. But the modern system of parliamentary democracy grew out of the evolving British constitution from the 17th century onwards, which essentially established a partnership between the elected parliament, the stable crown, and the inherited monarchy. These are a combination of powers which each provides checks and balances against the other. So it has a profound meaning, and we a privilege, as I say, to be living within its realm.
Thank you for that, Jenny. That's a very good point. That we consider the history and evolution of the monarchical system, the Westminster system of government, is most important. And yes, we are inheriting an important legacy, and it's evolved over a long period of time. And it's we change it at our peril. We change it. We move into the unknown if we change it without deep consideration. Beata.
I believe that American founding fathers, when they were forming up the American Constitution, were basically forming it with the thought that the British Constitution is the best ever model that they can actually look up. There was something in it that made the vote for it in their mind a thing to do. So
No
yes,
worries.
even though they stepped away from the monarchy in later years, but as such they were not opposed to the king. They were rather opposed to the taxes that were laid on them by the king. Hence they opted for the republic.
Mm. That's a very important point that the Americans considered their options before they actually formed their constitution, and of course the amendments to their constitution. This is all part of the evolution, if you like, of thinking, the evolution of engagement between the people and the government. And as I said, the Australian Constitution, the preamble, we the people. It's an agreement by the people. And I think that's most important when we take into account any consideration. Is it an agreement between the people, or is it becoming an agreement just between the politicians and vested interests? Judy.
Yes, our representative of our Queen, our Governor General, has some power in our Constitution, and we saw that way back when Gough Whitlam was removed, and the people endorsed that decision by voting in Malcolm Fraser, and he had quite a big majority, I can recall at the time. And it's good to see it working. And would that have worked did we not have our monarch, that wonderful system we have? I'm not sure if that would have worked. What could we have done? America can impeach their president, and it seems a very unstable system that they have for keeping a head of state, that's so to speak. We always have the Queen and her representative here in Australia. We must keep that.
Thank you for that, Judy. That's a very important point, because we see it in the, if you like, the situation with the United States. The president is under constant barrage. He is constantly being attacked because of policy, because of his position, because of past life, past sins, whatever. And the fact is, he certainly is not above politics, but he's immersed in the middle of politics. And that's the Republican model that I'm just going to take into account. There are a couple other models that I'd like to touch base on, and that is this. I'll bring up an article here on Russia Today, and it's in regard to Italy. And the picture there is of the current president of Italy, and he is in open conflict with the parliament. He is in open conflict. The president is in open conflict with the parliament. He's adamant. He has actually appointed a prime minister, an interim prime minister, and that's the picture of the interim prime minister down there. He has actually appointed an interim prime minister in defiance of the parliament, on the basis that he represents the International Monetary Fund, the European Union, and all big money. And the parliament was elected by the people of Italy. And so we've got this real argument going on. And the argument is between the people and the if you like, the president, the representative of big money. And that to me is a very important observation, that while America is, in my view, unstable, because of their president being under constant attack. And now in Italy, we've got this the president in defiance of the parliament. And not that long ago, we had Greece, where, of course, exactly the same thing happened. The leaders of Greece defied the elected representatives of the people and voted and endorsed the policies of the European Union and the International Monetary Funds, big banks. Now, no one votes for these big banks, but they've got all the say and all the power. And the fact is that, to me, it's becoming apparent that the real power behind the political process is big money. And I think we need to understand that and take that into account when we're looking at our system of government and any proposals or suggestions that we actually consider a republic over our limited constitutional monarchy. Judy.
Yes, you caught me on the hop there, Arnie. That what happened in Italy, I'm just a bit curious. We lost our Prime Minister a couple of years ago because members of his party decided that he wasn't doing the job properly, and they voted another Prime Minister in. I couldn't see any protection for us in that. We are still a little bit at the mercy of the power of our politicians, or the power that they assume.
Okay, you've thrown the ball down my end of the court, and I'm going to bat it. In regard to our Prime Minister is only ever the leader of the majority party in the lower house, generally. All right, sometimes he can be actually the leader in the Senate. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, audience, but I believe that John Gordon was a senator, and he was the leader of the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister, but he was not in the lower house. But generally it's the leader of the majority party in the lower house. And the fact is, they can come and they can go, and the Parliament should still function. And these power plays that go on, whether it's Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard, whether it's Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, they're all vying for power, for the front row seat of government. And the fact is, these politicians are ruthless people. They are ruthless people. Don't get confused. They are fighters, tooth and nail. They are mercenaries. And I think a very good example is what we're seeing in Italy today. That president is a ruthless man, and he has no issue defying the whole nation in order to pursue his goals. So when our Prime Minister comes and our Prime Minister goes, the fact is the Parliament continues. And the fact is behind the Parliament, the bureaucracy, the actual running of government continues. Whereas in this case, we're seeing that it's quite unstable. All right, I can see you, Beata, but I'm going to go to Jenny just to stay in order. Jenny.
Under the Prime Ministership of Mr. Whitlam was a classic example of how our system works to protect us, because the Houses of Parliament couldn't agree, and instead of having fisticuffs like they do in Japan and a lot of other countries, the Governor-General came in and he said, well, if you can't agree, I'm going to take it to the monarch, and the rules were that we go to the people and let them decide. Now, a lot of people would say that the Governor-General sacked Mr. Whitlam, but that wasn't the case. The people voted and they sacked Mr. Whitlam. And that was a very good example of our system working as it is supposed to work.
Thank you for that, Jenny. That's very important. Now, I'll just correct you on one particular point, just so that the audience is not confused. The Governor-General, John Kerr, was a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He understood the Constitution implicitly, specifically, in great detail. He did not approach the monarch to remove Whitlam's commission. He did it of his own volition, but as I understand it, he took advice from, I think it was Sir Garfield Barwick, as the Chief Justice of the High Court. He took advice legal advice within the parameters of the definition of the Constitution and the limited powers that he has. And on the basis of that, he removed Whitlam's commission, John Kerr, off his own volition, not advice or direction from the Queen, but as the Queen's representative. He did his job. And then Malcolm Fraser was given a commission as an interim Prime Minister to take the Australian people to an election, a general election, both houses of Parliament. And that's what Fraser did. And the people decided the outcome. And the process, in my view, worked well. But you've got to be very, very clear about who did what and when, because otherwise you can get confused about how the system actually works. And that's why this subject, even though it's got whiskers on it, even though it's a difficult subject to wrestle with, the principles are important. And that is that the power came back to the people. All right, Beata.
We're back to the Crown. The Crown is a check on any complete monopoly by any political powers, and it's a bulwark to the citizen in defense of his freedoms. That's what the Crown is. So the intangible values which undergird a nation must be above and beyond political controversies that all of us know, and the knowledge that the reserve powers of the Crown do exist must always act as a deterrent to political extremism.
I think that's very, very important. Can you just show the book? Can you just show the book to the camera? Freedom Wears a Crown. Just lift it a bit higher, please, baby.
Oh, sorry.
Freedom Wears a Crown is the name of that book that Beata's reading from.
Yeah.
And I think it's most important. Keep going.
And may I add that these are the words of Honorary St. Joe Bjelke Peterson in the foreword to the book. So he recommends the book. Sorry, I don't know which way to move it.
That's it. You've got it. Yeah. Freedom Wears a Crown. Yep.
Yeah. It's a very interesting book.
Excellent.
Of course,
hang on. Yeah, I've lost your audio, Beata. I'll just I'll go back to you. No. You done? No. Okay, right. I'm just going to. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut across to our to our different websites here. And okay, we've got Russia Today, but we've also, in this one, I've got the images of Harry and Meghan and before and after wedding and all that sort of stuff, and I think it was lovely. And to me, the issue is bigger than these two people. The issue is how we as a people are going to get on. And I've started to do a search. I'm actually looking for a document that was issued by, I believe, the government printer, and in it. The government printer highlights how the evolution of the American Constitution, the Australian Constitution, and the alignment with the similarities of the British Constitution are most important. And it's an evolution. And this current image that I've got, which is essentially the development of the Union Jack, the Union flag, it didn't happen at once. It happened over a period of time. And that's the most important point, that as it shows here, the St George Cross, which was England, and then St Andrew, which brought in Scotland, and then finally the Union flag, which brought in St Patrick's Cross. And these crosses were the, if you like, the evolution of the Union Jack. Now we hold the Union Jack in the corner of our flag, so we inherit that cultural evolution. And I think that's most important, that it didn't happen overnight. It grew, and it was organic, and it was the people, and it was the working things out. And that's what I find fascinating, because we talked earlier on, I think off camera, we talked about in the debates about the Senate, and how you had small states like Tasmania and South Australia and Western Australia who were hesitant to join the Federation because they were going to be swamped by these highly populated eastern states. And the purpose, the design, if you like, that's inherent in the Senate is that the states are represented equally. So Tasmania, that may have, throw a figure, say 500,000 people in Tasmania, and yet you may have 5 or 6 or even 7 million people in New South Wales. And in the Senate, Tasmania has equal representation, and that is most important, that they're not swamped by big numbers, and not just a massive population of, say, Western Sydney or something like that is going to swamp the whole state of Tasmania by its voting patterns. It says no, the Senate is there as checks and balances, and that's what our system is about. It's about checks and balances where absolute power doesn't reside anywhere specifically, but rather it's divided. And this division of power, we've got to get it clear in our mind. This division of power is why our Constitution works well. And our founding fathers were very specific about it. And of course, you've got the division, you've got the separation of powers in the Parliament and the executive, and then the judiciary. And that to me is another important observation, that while the executive drives government, and they do, there's no question about it, the executive drives government, the fact is the Parliament is there to keep an eye on the executive. And when the Parliament can't agree, and it says, well, the executive is out of order, and they can vote, if you like, supply bills down. And that's what happened with Whitlam. The Parliament voted the supply bill down. And the Parliament includes the lower house, House of Representatives, and the Senate. The Parliament voted the supply bill down. And so the protocol is that you go to an election because you don't have confidence of the Parliament. Whitlam refused. Okay, as an example, Whitlam refused. He didn't have the confidence of both houses of Parliament. They refused supply, and he refused to go to an election. Now that forces us into what? A dictatorship by Whitlam? Or go to the umpire. And that's the importance of our monarchical system, the umpire. Judy?
Yes, Arnie, that Italian story, the Italian president appointed this man, the former IMF gentleman, whose name, IMF director, as Prime Minister. That can't happen here. Isn't that good?
It is. It is good. Sorry, Judy, you've caught me short now. That's all right. No, I'll cut across to it because the article's important. This bloke here, the ex-IMF head, an ex-International Monetary Fund head, is made Italy's interim Prime Minister amid rage over the unconstitutional blocking of the Eurosceptic government. I think that article is very important. I think it says quite a lot. That here you've got one man. I know that I've seen this happen before in Ireland. Now, Ireland is a republic, and Ireland had a leader come in. He was more or less out of nowhere. He came in, and I understand he stripped the people's assets from their accounts. I'm pretty sure it was superannuation. He stripped it. He just basically emptied out all of the superannuation of the whole country and handed it to the IMF, and then immediately resigned. Now, come on. Where are we in this whole thing? Is that not criminality? And yet they use the Parliament. They go through the Parliament in order to make it law. And if that's not manipulation, I don't know what is. Now, I'm going to touch on something here that I haven't given you girls a heads up on. And that is, there was a Labor Premier, New South Wales, called Jack Lang. Jack Lang. He was the Premier who actually attempted to cut the ribbon for the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and the bloke on the horse rode through and cut it with the sword. That was Jack Lang. Now, he was sacked by the governor of that state. He was sacked by it. And I find that fascinating, that history, that a Labor Premier was sacked by the governor. And in this case, and this is the colourful history, it's something that's not taught in the history books, but it's certainly in Jack Lang's books that we've got a copy of here. And he was sacked because he attempted to set up a barrier between essentially the square mile of London, the banks in London. He tried to set up a barrier between them and funds that belonged to the people of New South Wales. And he confiscated, um, I'm not sure if it was in the form of notes or coins, but he certainly confiscated um, a certain amount of money in order to protect it from these banksters. And as a consequence, he was sacked. And I find that fascinating because the power of banks is like an octopus that just permeates everywhere. And you think you've got control of something, it's not necessarily so. And so all systems can be manipulated, but in our case, we see our monarchical system appears to be more stable. But the fact is, we've still got this argument going on about where does power reside? Does it reside in the governor or does it reside in the people? And in my view, it resides in the people. Jenny.
Yes, governments exist to serve the people, not the other way around. And of course, the British system has given us this division of power in the three-tiered system that uh, that help, that one man or one group of men can't just take over and control the parliament. So we have that division of power in the Crown and the upper and lower houses. Of course, no man-made system is perfect, but I think our constitutional monarchy is proven to be very satisfactory.
Thank you, Jenny. That's exactly right. In my view, it's exactly right. It's not perfect. There's opportunities for improvement. Um, I'm of the view that I think the Swiss have got the upper hand, if you like, in that while their country, I understand, is a republic, they have a rotating prime ministership or presidentship. They actually rotate it because they have citizens' initiative referenda. And in that citizens' initiative referenda, it means that if a bureaucrat or a politician, anyone on the public payroll, steps out of line sufficiently to cause the angst of the community, and I think the president of Italy is a good illustration. If someone like that steps out of the line, then the people of Switzerland can initiate a referenda. They go about, draw up a petition, get it legally drafted, and then they get sufficient signatures on it, and it's forced to referenda. And that, in that case, that person can be sacked. And I think that's very, very powerful. But the fact is that if we don't participate in the political process, and that's if you like the that's the inherent weakness within the Australian psyche, is that have a go, have a go, give everyone a fair go, all that sort of stuff, but at the same time put another shrimp on the barbie, crack another coldie, and watch the footy, and and we don't do anything unless we're absolutely forced to, and that in a sense could be our undoing or it could be our saving grace. I'm hoping that it's our saving grace, that it means that we're while we're watching what's going on, it's only when our dander is up that we'll go out there and try and sort it. All right, Beata.
Um, it's a historical fact that the British ideal grew out of monarchical system, grew out of organically out of the law, the common law, and Christianity that that country embraced. And this is a certain universal ideal that is worth preserving, that is above all the political systems and all the tyrannical dictators and such. So it would be very interesting to see how the Brexit vote takes off and what develops in the future out of that, because people voted. And of course you can see similarity with the Greek situation right now, when in government there are certain movements, Liga Nord, I believe, and another one is five-star movement, which are pushing for exit from EU. And I believe the grassroots movement is growing all around Europe to get rid of the bureaucracy in Brussels. So you see, this definitely has to be resolved, and it won't be resolved by IMF men in a top position.
Thank you for that, Beata. That's an excellent observation, and it probably is the. I'm going to do one last lap for us, ladies, because we're up to the half-hour mark. But it's an excellent realization that the grassroots, the people are starting to resist. Now, in the situation with Greece, they had Golden Dawn, and they actually arrested that bloke and trumped up charges and threw him in jail to stifle it and saying this and saying that. They were adamant that he was a, if you like, the Soviets always used to call anyone who was opposed to the totalitarianism was a terrorist, and that's what they labelled Golden Dawn as. And no doubt they're going to do the same with these organisations in Italy. They're going to label them as terrorist organisations and anti-government this and anti-government that, because the big bankers have got the media in their pockets. And the fact is that the media is complicit in this, and dare I say it, it's sad to say, but I don't hear any noise at all coming from the church. So if they're not saying anything, they're part of the problem and not part of the answer. All right, final comments. Judy.
Freedom wears a crown, and it does, doesn't it? Growing up in Australia, always aware of the monarchy, but not quite really understanding it. And I've learnt much over the years, and I'm very thankful to be in this country, and I understand why people go out of their way to move here and live, because of our stability and our beautiful country anyway. Long live the Queen.
Thank you for that, Judy. And Jenny Grundy, sorry.
Yes, you were speaking about Britain and Brexit, and of course they had lost their independence to a certain extent, and when it came in that they were going to be under a euro-dollar one money system, they realised that they were going to lose the Bank of England, and the man who pays the piper calls the tune. Once you lose the independence of your money control, well then whoever's controlling the money controls you. So suddenly many people came to that realisation that they didn't want to be under one money system to be controlled. But getting back to our constitution, I was going to say the same thing, Judy, to finish with, that freedom wears a crown, and the Australian Constitution inherits through the Crown the concept of common law, plus other conventions and precedents of the British Crown, but they're all within an Australian context.
Thank you for that, Jenny. And Beata, closing comments, please.
It's interesting that after the fall of Berlin Wall, where former socialist countries of the East Europe have formed so many parties that are monarchical in essence, and they forever trying to get back to get the monarch on the throne. And of course, worth mentioning is perhaps that this next month we will celebrate, or rather sadly celebrate, the 100 years since the Russian Tsar and his family were executed by Bolsheviks. Say it what you will against the Tsars. They did not build so many gulag camps as the Stalinists and Leninists and all of those other tyrants did.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Beata. That's a very salient point, that under under, if you like, the Soviet republics, under the Soviet republics, and the Chinese Republic at the moment, they've got a new Tsar. A new Tsar. The Chinese have appointed basically the leader there for life. It's madness. And of course, where do the actual Chinese people end up in this? They're just pawns in the game. They get no say at all. This is Arnie Leaks for the Crossroads, signing out. Once was a swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree. As he sat, as he watched and waited while his billy bawled, "Who'll come a waltzing Matilda with me?"